Okay. Hello, everybody. Welcome to this week's episode of Flora and Fauna Weekly. This week we have a very exciting guest, an expert on the amphibian, a Dr. Annabelle Heine.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to tell you guys about these little creatures, the frog.
It's an absolute pleasure to have you.
Thank you.
And as preparation for you on this episode, I've been doing a little research myself.
Oh.
So apparently these frogs, these special little amphibians, are actually in the same phylum as us because they have the same spinal cords.
True.
And you may have seen them bounding around in your backyard or relaxing by the local river. And these majestic marvels of nature, they can fit in the palm of your hand, but their back legs are so powerful, they can jump up to 10 times their own length. And those powerful legs are not only used in jumping, they are used in their magnificent swimming, because these creatures don't only live on land, but they also live in water. That's actually where the word amphibian comes from,
True.
meaning from the Greek, amphi meaning both, and bios meaning life. So these little creatures basically get to live two lives. In fact, they spend their earliest life stages completely submerged. Frogs go through a special type of development called metamorphosis, in which their morphology changes significantly as they age. They start as these semi-permeable soft eggs that must be laid in water, and then they hatch into tadpoles, which are basically these little heads with tails, which have a completely herbivorous diet. They continue to grow in the water and develop more complex structures like legs, and by the end of development, they completely lose their tail and are able to traverse both land and water. And also, when they grow up, they transition from being herbivorous to insectivorous, meaning that adults don't have to compete with their young. Just incredible. They also gain the ability to breathe on land because they develop lungs through this metamorphosis.
True.
And you may be asking, well, if they only develop lungs partway through metamorphosis, how are they able to breathe in water? They have a very unique solution for this. They actually have two ways of breathing. One very special one for under the water. Instead of the standard gill method used by most water-dwelling creatures, frogs make use of their slimy, membranous skin to diffuse oxygen into themselves directly.
Yes, and while that is incredible, unfortunately, a lot of the adaptations that make frogs so special are also contributing to their downfall. So I'm an expert on frogs. I specifically study frogs in Australia, and I've been researching how these guys have been affected by climate change. So first off, having this metamorphosis-based life cycle means that frogs are especially vulnerable to changes in their habitat. As opposed to most animals who live their whole lives in one ecosystem, frogs have two entirely separate habitats that both have to maintain really specific qualities for frogs to have a full, successful life cycle. So changes in water temperature, toxicity, and depth are just as dangerous for tadpoles as changes in their land habitats are for their adults. So specifically, since climate change has led to more droughts, there's less accessible water for frogs to lay their eggs in, and water that is available is often too shallow to provide adequate protection for the eggs to develop. And when I say protection, I don't mean protection from predators, I mean protection from the sun. Because the sun emits UVB radiation, which is toxic with direct exposure. Those of us with internal reproduction or with eggs with hard shells are safe, but remember, frogs have those soft eggs, and they rely on depth and murkiness of water to keep their eggs safe and to block that radiation. With lower water levels and smaller ponds, many frogs are forced to lay their eggs closer to the surface, meaning that those embryonic frogs are being exposed to greater levels of radiation. And this leads to a higher fatality rate for the eggs, as well as significantly higher levels of limb deformity in adults. So while many tadpoles never make it out of the egg, even the ones that do often cannot survive post-metamorphosis because of predation and their inability to feed.
Oh, that sounds just awful.
It is.
And I've been hearing a lot about the alteration of global weather patterns because of climate change, and which in some places has had drastic effect on the temperatures. And you were saying because of that susceptibility to all fluctuations, including temperature, I just thought it would be relevant to bring up here. According to researchers at the Journal of Experimental Zoology, fluctuating temperatures can act as a chronic stressor for frogs, whose annual hormonal cycles are very dependent on the season. Constant chronic stress is hard on the immune system for anyone, as I'm sure you know as a researcher. And a compromised immune system due to fluctuating temperatures means that frogs have a reduced ability to fight disease. diseases caused both by bacterial and fungus.
True.
This is bad enough already, but your research in Australia has been digging more into depth about how this makes it even worse for frogs. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Of course. So let me introduce you to the big bad amphibian killer in town. Batrachochytrium dendrobatitis, which we in the biz just refer to as BD.
$5 word, folks.
$5 word, is a fungus which can lead to the skin disease chytridiomycosis in amphibians. So remember that membranous skin that allows for oxygen diffusion. It's a really impressive adaptation, but it also means that skin diseases are especially dangerous for frogs. Basically what happens is that BD, as it colonizes on the frog's skin, it secretes enzymes which weaken the skin's structural integrity. So this means that a lot of its necessary functions, like keeping the animal hydrated, preventing it from damage, and allowing it to breathe, are seriously messed with. In most cases, chytridiomycosis will be fatal. And additionally, BD is not only highly dangerous, it's highly contagious. It's spreading across the world because frogs are traded globally for pets and for food. Actually, according to a study that I read recently in Conservative Biology, over 1 billion frogs are raised annually for human consumption. So I thank the French for that one. Because of this, chytridiomycosis is spreading around the world really, really quickly. It has already been linked to the decline of over 500 amphibian species and the extinction of at least 90, with frogs making up 93% of those cases. One paper in the Journal of Veterinary Science called this alarming decrease in frog populations emblematic for the current 6th mass extinction event. And a team of 41 scientists, my peers, recently published a study in Science that said that chytridiomycosis has damaged global biodiversity more than any other disease ever recorded.
Wow.
So with 40% of amphibian species at risk and a deadly frog-killing fungus spreading around the world really quickly, a compromised immune system due to climate change is the last thing that frogs need.
Wow, really sounds like no joke. But it isn't all doom and gloom for these little guys. There are several conservation efforts being made across the globe. One team of researchers, led by Professor Lee Berger from Australia.
I know her well.
Oh, wow, incredible. She first discovered that this fungus was killing amphibians in the wild. She's working on a breeding program to introduce more individuals with a resistance to this fungus out in the wild. Hopefully, as these individuals reproduce, the species as a whole will develop a better resistance. And scientists are even airlifting frogs out of areas saturated with this fungus in helicopters and planes to keep them alive and well. Impressively, 2 conservationists from Atlanta actually packed 150 endangered frogs into their carry-on suitcases and had to take them through TSA.
How did TSA feel about that?
Well, when they opened the bag, they had a little bit of a surprise. One of these little frogs actually jumped out straight at the TSA member's face, which is quite entertaining because this species of frog is very aptly named rocket frogs. Thankfully now, those conservationists were able to make it through the TSA, and those frogs are now safe in captivity.
Good for them. That's a great conservation effort. But really, at the end of the day, all efforts to reduce climate change and restore Earth to a healthy temperature are conservation efforts. Frogs are really, really incredible animals, but they're also extremely fragile. The rapid population decline we're witnessing is not only frightening for the future of amphibians, it's what a lot of researchers are calling a canary in the coal mine, a frog in the coal mine, I guess, for all biodiversity in a globalizing, warming planet. Frogs are a key part of the global ecosystem, and saving them is just one part of the process of saving the planet.
It was an absolute pleasure to have you on today.
Thank you so much. It was my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.